coming on Aliyah, being children of survivors, second generation, do you think that had an influence on your decision to make Aliyah? It's posed to all of you.
Well, the microphone.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, well...
Did the fact that they all are
the
survivors...
truth is that I came to Aliyah because of my husband, Naki. He was on the way. But when I stood at the grave that you saw in 1992, and a young boy from Minsk was holding... 1992 was just when people were allowed in, when the Iron Curtain fell. And this young boy from Minsk was standing there, Jewish boy, with his old grandmother who was Slava Mir, and she was holding, and he was holding the flag, and we were all saying Hatikva. I thought to myself, I said, thank God that we are here in Israel. This is my only place. And thank God my children are here, my grandchildren are here, and this is the place. My mother was a great Zionist, and she came at the end. She lived with us for 10 years.
No, I don't think it had any influence. In fact, I more remember the songs of Yafar Connie and Shoshana the Mari that my father used to play on those records more than I know. That was like, I think that's what made me want to come on Aliyah. But I don't think that was anything that had to do with the Shoah.
Sorry.
I don't think that the Shoah, living with Holocaust survivors, directly impacted, that there's a causal relationship or a linear connection between my parents and their experiences in the Shoah and our subsequent decision to make Aliyah. All I know is that Israel was really very much at the center of our life at home. My father was a very strong Zionist. He worked for the Zionist Federation. For many years, he wrote articles in the paper. I remember in 1967, just before the Six-Day War, he wrote this incredible article about how Israel will survive and will thrive, and he was actually quite right. He was a man of letters, my father, and his sort of approach to Israel really rubbed off. So whether it was because he was a Holocaust survivor, I'm not sure, but certainly the Zionist influences in my home, and by the way, in the school that we went to in Cape Town with our former headmaster, Maya Katz, was a strong influence. Also being in Habonim was a major factor for me. So the Shoah, I think, was there, part of it, but I don't think it was a significant part in our final decision making.
I just want to add that I think that the youth movement, B'nai Kiva, had a very strong influence in my decision to come on.
Choosing a profession, I noticed that Sodis are deeply into education and Rose chose research in this level. Did that have any influence on choosing your professions?
I just know that the literature seems to indicate that a number of children of Holocaust survivors went into the helping professions, into social work, teaching, psychology. I'm a little bit involved in all of those. I didn't consciously go into that profession because of my background, but I'm sure it played a part in the direction which I chose.
My last question, then we'll turn the mic to the audience.
Can I just answer that? I think that what happened to me was that it was a process, because I recently went to a lecture by Deval, who wrote The Hair with the Amber Eyes, and he spoke about the fact that there was a provocation, and that made him become interested in his family. And I think that that's what happened to me. It was a process that at my father's yard side, at his second yard side, or first yard side, I felt that I didn't know who I was, and I didn't know where we came from. And that provoked me to do that. But as time went by, I sort of joined together the early childhood education that I started doing together with my PhD, and gradually became interested in research, and it became like a historical aspect of my life.
So for my last question, do you have any suggestions for making sure that victims as well as survivors / heroes of the Shoah are not forgotten, be it in family circles as well as formal education in Israel and abroad?
I can only talk about it on a family level. For us, at the suggestion of my wife, we actually did, me and my three daughters, we did a roots trip to Belarus, Slony, where my father was born, and to Vilna, where my mother was born. It was a very important part of our bonding and learning about our family roots. In fact, my youngest daughter, was pregnant at the time. You will have noticed that when Eileen had the photograph of the three Bielski brothers, one of them is Asael. And my daughter at the time, she was, I think, 6 months pregnant, and she came back, and when the child was born, a girl, she didn't know, her and her husband didn't know what to call the child, and she was still cognizant of her experience in Lithuania, and the Bielski brothers meant a lot to her, the story of the Bielski brothers, and she eventually named her daughter Asaela, named after Asael Bielski. There's only one other Asaela that we know of in Israel. Her name is Asi Weinstein. It happens to be the daughter of Asael Bielski. We just found this all out by chance. And in fact, the husband, Weinstein, is a really interesting guy. He collects violins of the Shoah and did a presentation to APAC a few months back. And so we somehow have got to the Bielski family. We met Tuvia Bielski's daughter. It's and that's, by the way, how your question, in response to your question, is how we sort of keep it alive, but don't obsess about it and don't let it paralyze us.
There's no street in Israel named Bielski.
I can just say for myself, can you hear me? Personally, for myself, we also took our children. I met Sonia. I didn't mention that we made them, that her and her husband are righteous Gentiles. I forgot that. But for myself personally, I used to sit with my mother every Shabbat and look at pictures. And to me, I feel that wherever I'm asked, which I'm asked, and I go out and I speak at schools and places like this on Yom HaShoah, that's how. And one of my daughters is carrying that on. So it's very important. Important to my mother.
I have a different relationship with Lithuania because going there often and sort of researching and being in the archives, and I mean, I walk around Vilna without a map. So it's a different kind of relationship with Lithuania. But I think that it is part of my being, and it'll always be part of my being. I took our son in last year. He went with me on a roots tour, and I have to say that for me to see him walking around Plumyan, and Uzhven, where my parents were born, and also going to Tels, to the yeshiva where my father studied, so I thought, okay, this is closing the circle. It was worth every minute of it. It was an unbelievable experience. But on the other hand, to see him mystified by the fact that neighbors killed neighbors and friends killed friends is something that he cannot fathom out until this day. And that's the reason why he wrote what he did, because at Ponar, you actually see the pits, and that's where it happened. And so on the one hand, for me, Lithuania is a place that I go to often, I know it. And then on the other hand, I saw him in another place completely, and sort of putting together these feelings was a very difficult experience for him too.
So I just also wanted to add something that my family in England, some of you may know my first cousin Rafi Kaplinsky. If you were in South Africa in the 1960s, especially around 1968, he was one of the student radicals on the left of South African politics, led the first sitting at the University of Cape Town, and in a sense left Judaism, left being part of the Jewish family in many ways. And his daughter Natasha Kaplinsky, who was at one stage the BBC anchor, news programmer, director, she won a competition in England called Strictly Come Dancing. It's a celeb competition. She became a real profile personality, and they did a series on her. She's not Jewish. Rafi didn't marry a Jewish person. And part of the presentation on Natasha's life was going to Slony to see where her grandparents lived and where my father and my father's family lived. And that somehow brought her back to Judaism, brought the whole family back to Judaism. It's a very diverse family, and I say this in a very non-judgmental way. They're Christians, they're Muslims. It's a really interesting family mix. Our family in Israel are Bethlehem halachically Jewish. But what happened was, the interesting thing is Rafi wanted to really be in touch with his roots and to see where his father was born and lived. And the whole family, us from Israel, Rafi and his family, including Natasha, who's a celebrity in England, Rafi and his family from England, family from South America, we all went to Belarus for a week and we did a roots program. We saw how the partisans lived. We went into the forest, saw how they lived, just unbelievable. And so the Shoah, the impact of the Shoah has really reached to unbelievable places and spaces and brought the family back in many ways, reunited the family.
Okay, thanks very much. Questions from the audience? Please.
Should we bring them up?
Hi, I just want to thank you for bringing me here tonight, because this has been phenomenal. I grew up in South Africa and everybody has a story to tell. I'm new to Israel and I've lived in the States for many, many years. And I'm just curious, you know, with the way you talk about the past and what your parents or grandparents or family members went through, but there's an anti-Israel and a very strong anti-Semitic sentiment worldwide today, as we know, and it's been grouped together. There's about 14 million Jews, I believe, in Israel, 14.5 million in the States, and about 3 more million around the world. What do you feel going forward? I know that was Jerusalem Post, this show. It's all my question to the panel is, when you speak today and going forward, what do you tell children today, Jewish children from all over the world, or wherever you speak, who may never have the opportunity, unfortunately, to meet a survivor, and how to combat the growing anti-Semitic sentiment that is, you know, you would think never again, but it's here and it's happening, and I'm just curious as to how you handle that.
You know, people often say that you deal with the Shoah and you move on. You sort of, you close the circle, as it were. Right? Go and see where your parents lived and give testimony and listen to other survivors speak. And the reality is the circle's never closed and you move forward, you don't move on. And so when you have this sort of stuff that's happening around us, the anti-Semitic stuff and the self-hating Jews, I'm just responding personally now. It really puts me into a corner where I'm really intolerant and unsympathetic and don't understand, and it pushes me, and I imagine a lot of other people in a similar situation, into a mode where I'm angry and annoyed at what I can do in my own little way. You know, I try. I'm not sure what the answers are globally. It is a real problem, and it's probably going to get worse, unfortunately. And I think the powers that be have to really invest time, effort, energy, and the best professional resources into Hasbara and how we cope, and giving our kids the defences, especially on the campuses, to cope with it. And I think that's why the Soknut in this building we're sitting are sending young Israelis out to the North American campuses to give them the armour and defence mechanisms, because a lot of them aren't equipped to handle what's coming their way. Even kids who go to Jewish day schools. That's really a critical investment that the government of Israel has made, but there's a lot more that has to be done.
Okay, thanks, Sonny. Another question? Just give the microphone, please.
I had a bit of a different experience to you guys. I was brought up in Sydney, Australia, and made Aliyah a couple of years ago. And my mother went through the camps the whole year. My father left Baruch Hashem in '39, so, you know, because of Hitler that grew up in Australia. The Jewish day school they went to, which was the main school there, 90% of us were first generation of Holocaust survivors. So I grew up with it totally surrounding me. All my family went through the Holocaust, everyone I know, their parents did. I've seen the repercussions that I've had from growing up with such a Holocaust influence, and I was just wondering what kind of shtick, you might use the word, that you have had passed down into your lives. And I'm very cognizant of it also, not to pass it down to my children and my grandchildren. So I was just wondering how you were affected by it.
I don't know, I think I actually turned out pretty good, my brother and I and my sister. Because I think that I was born into the Shoah. When I came to Lear, I felt as if I knew every little nook and cranny. I grew up with it. So I didn't, there were shtick, I mean, my mother did. You know, there were things that, but I don't know. I don't think that I really,
You know, there's a line from the song Hotel California by the Eagles. You can check out any time, but you can never leave. Okay, and that's in a sense what, you know, children, my experience as a child of Holocaust survivors. I would like to leave at times, as you heard that one paragraph that I wrote, which in a sense resembles some of my thinking at different stages, but you can never leave it. And it's, on the one hand, it's a blessing to have that privilege to carry the torch and to pass it on. And on the other hand, it's a burden. And, you know, we can never compare our experience to what our parents went through, but it is a burden that one carries. And it's not something, it's on your shoulder all the time. I mean, I don't consciously, for me personally, it's not, unless, you know, my wife sometimes thinks that I'm more paranoid than I should be. And I probably am, and that's passed down. I hope it's not passed down to my children. But in fact, I'll just read you how it does transfer into my daily life sometimes. This was at the height of the Intifada, living with it in Jerusalem, and I call this the guilt trip. I'm not sure if one can really articulate the jumble of emotions one feels on boarding the bus. Now you remember, buses were blowing up in Jerusalem throughout the country. From the obsessive scrutiny, and I go by bus and Rakevit Hakala to work every day. From the obsessive scrutiny of all who get on to the growing and panicky suspicions one harbors about a potential suicide killer who may be sitting inches away from me, to the questions one grapples with. Should I tell the driver to stop? The person next to me seems to be overdressed in the stifling heat. Or will I cause unnecessary panic and alarm? Somebody's phone. I'll just that's a bit of light relief. Well, I'll come back to the poem. So should I tell the driver to stop? The person next to me seems overdressed in the stifling heat. Or will I cause unnecessary panic and alarm? If I don't tell the driver to stop and the bomb goes off, am I to blame? If I get off on an unplanned stop, as I've often done because I'm shit scared, and I haven't let the driver know and the bus explodes, how do I live with myself? And when I finally get a chance to collect my breath, after listening frantically to news bulletins thereafter, hoping that my suspicions were just my normal paranoia, I'm a child of Holocaust survivors, you know, I managed to wipe the sweat off my brow, and I'm thankful that another day has safely passed, and I haven't been scraped off the sidewalk by gentle and caring hands. Now, the Shoah permeates my thinking as well, unfortunately, consciously or unconsciously, but it's not something which is there 24/7. It's responsive. It's not being proactive. It's being reactive to what I'm living with.
Okay, one last question, please.
I can raise my voice. You may not need the microphone. Thank you very much, all three of you. This is a lot of food for thought.
in what you presented. I'm wondering, where does it go from here? We've had the experience of the third generation. What do you feel the third generation is going to take from this for the fourth generation? Should it continue? How should it continue? And in terms of the personal family experience, family albums that get passed on from generation, family trees get passed on from generation. I know in my case, I did a family tree in three colors. Blue for those in Israel, no color for those in America, excuse me. Black for those murdered in the Holocaust, and red for those at that time trapped behind the gates of the Soviet Union, all of whom came out in the 90s. So, how do you feel about passing this on for future generations through your grandchildren? Heavy question.
I'm not going to answer that question, but because I just hope that our kids are going to be normal and unscathed, like, you know, unlike us. But I'm going to tell you one story that, in terms of impacting the next generation, you will remember the Klimt paintings, the Bloch-Bauer story with Helen Mirren, where The Woman in Gold. Remember the movie? This painting, beautiful painting, became available, and the family, Ron Lauder bought the painting for $135 million. 150, okay? And, right, and so the family members were, you know, entitled to a share of the spoils. And one of the family members actually made it to Vancouver, to Canada. You might not have heard of the story. And they were a family that, when they came to Canada, as they disembarked from the boat, they saw a car called Bentley. And they changed their name from Bloch-Bauer to Bentley because they wanted to have nothing to do with the Shoah. And they happened to be beneficiaries of this $150 million because they were family. They were Bloch-Bauers. And they were a very successful lumber family. In British Columbia and Vancouver, a number of families went into the lumber business, and they became like multi-millionaires. And I thought there was like almost a sense of injustice that here this family had married out, no longer connected to Yiddishkeit, and were going to be the inheritors of this fortune. And I happened to read an article in the Globe and Mail, the Canadian newspaper. They said they were thinking of giving away a portion of the money to Jewish causes. So I was working in Yad Vashem. Part of what I do is fundraising. My antenna immediately picked up. I was on the next plane to Canada, part of my work, and I went to go and see Michael Bentley, who's absolutely not Jewish. He's the son of the original parents. And I said, listen, Michael, you know, we got talking, and it's wonderful, you know, your family have come into this fortune. And, you know, Yad Vashem is doing all this work, and we're involved in Holocaust education and research and development, and it really would be fantastic if you know, a portion of this money, you know, came our way. You know, so it's like, I went to see him once, and he thought about it, and the second time he said, listen, speak to our lawyers in Los Angeles, the one that won the case, you know, for the plaintiff. And then the third time I saw him, he had just taken out a family album, which the family brought out. I mean, this family's totally Christian, they go to church every Sunday. And there is the family album going back 2 or 3 generations. There are rabbis, Hasidic rabbis, and synagogues, and learning, and it's so Jewish, and this guy is so un-Jewish and so disconnected. So how we actually transfer it into second generation and third generation is so difficult to predict. We never got the money, by the way, at Yad Vashem. I'll let you know that. But it's really, in many ways, it's what we call a crapshoot. It can go anyway. Obviously, you want to make sure your kids have got the armor around them, they're protected, they know about their Jewish identity, they're strong within their Judaism, and you hope for the best, that they can cope with the world out there, that they're strong enough, and you don't want to put them in a situation where they're going to carry this burden. They don't need it. They really don't need it. They need to be aware of it. In my opinion, they don't need it. I don't know what Roz.
Okay, we're going to end off. I just want to tell you that my mother had a beautiful voice, and would always sing Zionist songs she learned at Hashomer Hatzair in Mir. And 2 songs from the war. One was Kol Nidre, which a chazan in the forest taught her. She used to laugh and say that when you are hungry and the air is cold, your voice is very clear. She sang the most beautiful Kol Nidre. The second song is Zognit Kemo. The title means never say, and derives from the first line of the song, never say that you have reached the final road. Zognit Kemo was adopted by a number of Jewish partisan groups operating in Eastern Europe. It became a symbol of resistance against Germany's persecution of the Jews in the Holocaust. This song was written by Hirsch Glick, a poet and a partisan who never survived the war. I have passed around the words, and I would like to have played the song in Yiddish, but I decided I think we're better off singing in Hebrew. Please feel free to join in and let us remember the 6 million men, women, and children who perished during those awful years. Thank you.
Could everybody please still wait another 5 minutes? I would appreciate everybody to please give kavod to the 3 presenters of tonight. Please wait another 5 minutes.
Lots of stuff.
Could we please end the evening with kavod the way it started, so it should end the same way? Please, everybody be seated and end the evening with kavod the way it started. Thank you. I'm sure everybody will agree this was the most amazing, interesting, emotion stimulating evening and event put on by Telford in the recent times. We have learned much tonight. Most of the family's roots come from the same geographical areas that were spoken about. I want to again some special thanks to Sally, Rose and Eileen for your very emotional, professional presentations. Even though Greer Faye-Cashman is not with us, I want to thank her personally for having put it in the Jerusalem Post and entered it quite a few times. I've got presentations here which I'd like to hand out to our three people here. This book called United Nation was just published a week ago by a South African gentleman called David Kramer. A young gentleman put together a wonderful production here of what Israel and what Israelis really are. And it's an incredible buy. I would recommend it for anybody. We're all proud citizens of this wonderful country, and that's why I chose it to present to our three speakers. Each one has got an inscription in it. Eileen. Sorry. And my colleague, Rose. Thank you very much. Please allow me the opportunity to announce our forthcoming events for Telford Jerusalem. In a month from now, the end of June, we'll be having Honorable retired Ambassador Meir Rumem, who served Israel for more than 4 decades. He worked with 3 American presidents, as well as with the famed Abba Eban Zechrono Livracha. That will be on the 26th of June in this hall. End of July, we will have a walking tour with David Zwebner through the Old City or Ir David. And after the Chagim in October, Richard Shavet Zion will give us an incredible presentation about Jewish music filtering through Lithuania, South Africa, and Israel. And if Richard does something, it's great. Looking forward to all you again coming to our functions. I noticed a lot of new faces here we haven't seen before, so please join us. If you don't get emails from Telford, make sure you write your name and email down and Terry at the back of the hall. Drive home safely, and I think it will be appropriate if you stand up now and sing Atikva together. Thank you, Eric Talk. Please drive home safely and carefully. God bless everyone.